Okay. Hopefully this one will be a lot less because I got a lot fewer notes this time. Oh boy. Here we go. So, Gauntlet is thrown, aka Illusionist Faceless Mage's Trap. Okay, here we go. So, first thing we see right at the beginning of this episode is Joey is apparently really crap at the game, right? Because he uses nothing but monsters. Okay, cool. Cool. So then they get Yugi's grandpa to train him, which is actually way better handled in the uh, sorry, it's better handled in the sub, obviously. Also, although I will say this, I prefer the poster that Yugi's grandpa is fiddling with in the dub because it shows off Blackluster Soldier, which is funny because this episode actually contains a spoiler in the dub. Believe it or not, it's not the biggest of spoilers, but it if you know where it's from, then yeah, it's a spoiler. Yeah, so Joey's getting trained by Grandpa, which is gets a few weeks of practice in, which is kind of neat. They mention in the sub. They mention the 3 million yen prize of the tournament. Now, granted, this is probably with current day figures, but the current exchange rate between yen and US dollars is about 27,555 for US dollars. I don't know the cents. I only calculated it during the episode, so specifically the Japanese episode. So then we're introduced to two characters that are going to be prominent throughout the entire freaking show, for good or for bad. Weevil Underwood and Rex Raptor, aka Insector Haga and Dinosaur Ryuzaki, respectively. I do not like calling Rex Dinosaur Ryuzaki, so yeah, I'm just gonna refer to him as Rex Raptor from now on. Okay? Okay. uh yeah, these two guys are wow. Their decks are the epitome of weak sauce. I mentioned that, you'd be able to crush most most anime decks. Yeah, those two are brilliant. Excuse me. Are a brilliant example of that because, I mean, for God's sakes, the battle is literally against Twin-Headed King Rex, which is a decent attack strength dinosaur monster, versus Basic Insect, which is one of the weakest insect cards ever. Basically, only getting beaten out in terms of usefulness by Petite Moth, which is an utterly useless card, and in terms of stats, is only beaten out by like the level monster Ultimate Insect level 1. So, yeah. But of course, because cheap nonsense is cheap nonsense, and the fact that we don't see the entire duel, which is what the dub treats it as, which is like, wow, that's dumb. But anyways, ooh, excuse me. Might have to take a break after this. But yeah, then we're introduced to the president, the CEO of Industrial Illusions himself, Maximilian Pegasus, or if you are preferring your Japanese version, Pegasus J. Crawford. I will simply continue to refer to him as Pegasus for the remainder of these videos. Okay? Okay. I'm gonna say this as bluntly. I'm gonna say something that's gonna make me sound that's gonna get people to hate me. Yeah, I'm not a fan of his Japanese voice acting. Not the voice actor. The voice actor is fine. I get it that he's supposed to be an American who doesn't speak Japanese very well, but it just kind of comes across as if he's overplaying his role, right? And the times where they try to make him menacing, I feel are actually more effective in the dub. Now, I'll be paying attention as we go through because, again, and this will be my first time actually sitting down and really watching the sub from beginning to end. So, we'll see if that continues to be a thing. But from what episodes I've seen of the Japanese version, yeah, in my opinion, he's more intimidating in the dub. And I think he should be because he's the antagonist of the arc. You know, if we can't take Pegasus seriously, then where's the tension? At least in my opinion. So then Yugi receives a videotape sent to him by Pegasus, and this leads to a tape hypnotizing him and manipulating him during a duel. Can I just say that I prefer this to be like effectively a magic clone of Pegasus in the instead of just a tape that's hypnotizing Yugi. I don't know. I find that to be a better idea. Yeah, for this shadow game, which apparently Yugi knows what the shadow games are. I guess he's studied history. Interesting. More on that in a minute. Also, for the record, I like the idea of of special duels. This is actually our first introduction to that concept. 15-minute time limit. Let's go. Right? This is also where the rules tend to be screwball. This is where the rules actually start to be screwball, by the way. Okay? Because, although Duelist Kingdom is going to have rules that are just going to be like, for example, in here, Yugi attacks Komori Dragon, and it's Pegasus's life points that go down. Also, Yugi explains why he didn't go after Dragon Piper in the sub. In the sub, he explains, "It's sentimentality. I'm setting my dragon free," which is dumb because if you destroyed Dragon Piper, you would have won, and that would have set Komori Dragon free anyway, because of the rules that Pegasus established. Now, I know what you're gonna say. Hey, and you're gonna point to, hey, you gave Destin to the shout out last time, Blue Wolf. So this is Atem's pride coming into a factor. Again, like I said, I'm gonna continue to call him Atem. This is Atem's pride, and admittedly, yes, this is the first sign of his pride being an issue. I feel like they don't play with that outside of this season and season 4. And in my blunt opinion, it kind of feels like it comes out of complete left field in season 4. Would have been fine in season 2 or 3, but season 4 just feels like too late in the game for them to be pulling that. We'll discuss that when we get there because we're way far away from that. I mean, we're on episode 2, for God's sakes, here. We got a ways to go before we're ready for that. Yet, you know. Oh, and then Pegasus also mentions in the Japanese version that the game is evolving every day. His game is evolving every day. Which, yeah. Although in the real world, that's more like it evolves like every year or every few years, you know. He also mentions in the Japanese version that participating in Duelist Kingdom is supposed to be the cost of losing this duel. And Tape Pegasus is all, super, super confident, right? But he didn't see someone's skull coming because it's tape hypnotism. Admittedly, that does make things make more sense. Although I would argue, I like the idea that the magic clone wouldn't have full access to the Millennium Eye's powers. So I can still make this make sense, but keep in mind I have to do so with headcanon, not with actual canon explanations. Sense make? So I have no real evidence for my headcanon. Just gotta make that very clear here going forward. But speaking of shadow games and Millennium items and hypnotism and all that shit, I don't really have that many notes on this. Yeah, the Japanese version. Okay, if you want to actually really get down to it, the Japanese version's notes would be, let's see, five additional notes for the Japanese version, which is it's just kind of there. Right? But I suppose we should get into the dub's changes to this episode. So the first thing I want to mention is the Shadow Realm. You've all heard it. It's 4Kids' biggest lie in the series. The Shadow Realm does not exist within the Japanese version. No, it doesn't, and that's actually going to bite the Japanese version in the ass a couple of times. Not majorly, not screw it over kind of, and make it generate a giant fucking plot hole, but it is going to generate a mini plot hole. So, in my opinion, it's a plot hole, but it's the minorest of plot holes. It's the kind of you can just kind of shoo it away kind of thing, right? The Shadow Realm is effectively hell. You are basically sending your opponent to hell when you banish them to the Shadow Realm, which arguably is worse. Which, to be honest with you, that actually kind of fits with Kazuki Takahashi's overall approach. Because I never talked about Kazuki Takahashi. It just occurred to me. I never really talked about the man himself, did I? Huh. But then again, I mean, that would be more something to discuss with the manga anyway. Because, yeah. But admittedly, there is a few places where I would want to talk about Kazuki Takahashi and just kind of to kind of explain things more. And I have a spot to talk about that. It's the same with season 0. So I forgot season 0 and I forgot Kazuki Takahashi. I do have a place where I can discuss both, and I'm gonna try and remember to make a note out somewhere to kind of make certain of it. I may even just kind of limit myself to one page for a few pages, but we'll see. We'll see if that actually is feasible going forward. The other one is explaining that the game has ancient Egyptian origins. Now, admittedly, it's basically just the opening blurb repeated by Pegasus, which is not as good as I was initially thinking. But I do like the idea of, don't you know you invented this game? And then Pegasus being like, what if I said I didn't? And then that being the shock instead of, I'm gonna play Silverfang, and that's the shock. It's like, Again, I don't like the tape hypnotism. It makes sense, but it's just kind of like, I just, there's already high magic in this series, damn it. Just go full tilt with it, you know? Instead of these parlor tricks, you know? I get it, rules magic, but even that's kind of like, I like magic to be potent and powerful. And admittedly, I do like the idea of the supposed tape hypnotism being the limits, but you don't need it to be the tape hypnotizing Yugi for there to be limits. And yes, it makes more sense with the visuals for it to be hypnotism. I get it. But eh. So yeah. So then there's a technicality loss because the timer runs out before Summon Skull can smack the faceless mage. Gee, it's almost as if you should have attacked Dragon Piper there, Yugi. Again, like I said, Dragon Piper's controlling Gamori Dragon. You destroy Dragon Piper, and oh, would you look at that? Dragon Piper can no longer control your dragon, and your dragon comes back to you. Doi! Like, come on. Even Pegasus gets that. Judgment. Smack! I win, Blue Eyes comes back to me. Anyways. So then the technicality loss happens, and Yugi's grandpa is captured. Captured. With the right incentive, anybody can be made to play the game. Yeah. Which is funny, because in contrast to my previous episode, to the previous episode, yeah, there's not a lot for me to say about this episode. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's fine for what it is. It's just, I don't know. It's a nifty little setup to set up Pegasus as the big bad of the arc, but I just feel like it just kind of falls flat on its face. For the record, yes, the tape hypnotism thing is what was happening in the manga. So they were sticking with the manga, which is actually kind of fits with what Yu-Gi-Oh originally was, which was like, all kinds of games and not just this one card game. So it is nice that they're trying to kind of combine the two ideas. Don't worry, Kazuka Takahashi will be allowed to do his big gaming thing a bit later. Multiple times, actually. Well, okay, that's a lie. He'll be able to do it twice more. Once with a quote-unquote filler arc. We'll talk about that when we get there. And then uh, and then, of course, with the final season. But, yeah. One last thing I want to talk about. Well, two more, really. Why is "Passionate Duelist" the song that plays when when Grandpa's soul gets taken? They will use that as a victory song. Is that supposed to hint at Pegasus not exactly being pure evil? Maybe, I don't know. It's just a really weird choice, in my opinion. The dub is just. I think the dub is just silence, but I could be wrong. But yeah, no, it's. What the hell? You know? So, there's one last thing I want to talk about. This is the first episode where I prefer the dub over the sub. Yeah, I didn't even talk about that last time. The first episode, I have no preference. Both episodes are fine for what it is, right? Right? I would say musically, I do prefer the Japanese version of the first episode, but there's nothing really wrong with it either way, right? I lean more towards the sub, but both are actually fine for what they are. This episode, well, this is where everybody hates me forever because I prefer the dub of this episode. Like, I tried to get into the spirit of the Japanese version, and the Japanese version is not as ridiculous as I thought. It's not. It's fine for what it is. But I just feel like setting up the whole ancient Egyptian thing now, here, in the second episode, not only in the opening, but also in other stuff, kind of sets up things that we'll see later on. Because in the Japanese version, you don't really see the ancient Egyptian origins of this series until way later. Like, we're going to be late into season one in order to do that, right? Like, the amount of duels that are left, I think, are like 4 in the entire arc at that point. When we finally start to see the ancient Egyptian origins in this series, and that's eyebrow raising to me, admittedly. So yeah, I prefer the dub. I think I think it just works better. Although there is that spoiler when he's talking about the ancient Egyptian stuff that's just like, mm, so shrug. I mean, I guess I guess if you can like turn away from the screen, mean, so I guess my advice is if you watch these before you watch any of these videos, if you're watching the dub and you get to the part where Yugi is like, "Hey, don't you know you invented this game?" And then Pegasus says, "What if I didn't?" Turn away from the screen and then wait for Yugi to say, "Hey, it's a nice story, Pegasus," and then that's your cue that you can look back. And then you will for sure be able to skip the spoiler. It's not a very long scene. It's only like a minute long, so it's not like you'd be looking away for too long. Regardless, though, I just don't have much to say about this episode. This episode was fine for the most part. It just doesn't really give me anything juicy to chew on, except maybe the beginnings of the potential of Atem's pride getting the better of him. But again, it's a throwaway bit. But then again, that's kind of Babylon 5 in a nutshell. Your first watch through, you're just throwing it away, and then on your second viewing, you realize, oh shit, you know. Regardless, this was a decent episode, and I suddenly don't remember what it is. There it is. This was a decent episode. It sets things up well enough. But that's all I got for this one. You know? Definitely shorter than my last one. But regardless, I just don't have that much to say, and this is probably going to be the standard length. I might end up having to like just feel like I must find something, anything to kind of give you at least like 20 minutes because I feel like I'm cheating you out of a thing. Next week, however, we do have quite a few things to talk about because we're going to have to be talking about Joey's sister, and I'm going to have to be, and there's a reason why I bookmarked that yen to dollars uh, website. There's a website that I use for converting yen to dollars. US dollars specifically, admittedly, although I could change that to Canadian. It doesn't really matter which one I do because they're so comparable. I think currently it's like one is worth. I don't remember which one's more. Regardless, I'm going to go ahead and chop this off and get ready to talk about the next one because the next one's going to have a decent number of changes. This one had some changes, and that's probably what lengthened the time, was the whole Shadow Realm and the ancient Egyptian thing. But next week, well, Next week is the trip to Duelist Kingdom, and where one of the most iconic monsters in Yugi's deck goes bye-bye. See you next time, guys. Blue Wolf Alex of the Lore Walkers, signing out. See you later, guys. Duel, standby.